We're not quite ready to start, but just about. Yeah. Wonderful. All right, let's get started again. Thank you to everybody for getting back after our break. And I'd like to invite to the table Kate Flanagan.
Sorry, she's just pulled out.
Oh, okay. So Dylan, if you're available. Thank you. And you're very welcome to either be at the podium or the table. It's 5 minutes, which will go by quite quickly. And if you wish us to ask you questions, that's included.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your time today. I live in Brooklyn and get around mainly by bike, but also drive and visit Newtown often. I think this is a really great plan and balances a large number of competing needs as best as possible. I really appreciate all the work that everyone's put into this. This plan is needed because there isn't enough space. That's it. That's the summary. There isn't enough space. And it's only going to get worse as Newtown grows, and Newtown should grow, Newtown must grow, or our city will become really boring. The population increased by 1,300 people between the 2006 and 2018 census, and apparently Wellington has 681 cars per 1,000 people, but hopefully lower than that in Newtown, and I don't know if that overlaps entirely with the scheme area, but the point is, the point remains we can't keep Newtown growing without a plan to manage the limited space on our streets. We need limits on the number of cars, and this plan provides a limit partially through the limit on the number of permits, and I think that's awesome. The population and car ownership growth quickly outstrips car parks removed as space is prioritised to safe cycle lanes. We've heard a lot about the number of car parks taken out by cycle lanes, the natural population growth, and number of car ownership exceeds the number of parks taken out anyway. We need to prioritise space on the streets better and think about different modes. I know that this does put an extra expense on people who own cars in this area, yes, but owning a car is already more expensive than most people realise, and this is a relatively minimal addition to the total cost of ownership of owning a car. This is probably less than one tyre per year, and cars amazingly go through a lot of those every time I go for a warrant. My mechanic can tell you. Newtown is very well served by public transport, and that's back to good shape again. New cycle lanes providing more choices on bikes in particular. As this plan prioritises parks for different uses, I'd really like to see cycle hangers trialled as are being rolled out in London. Secure covered on-street bike parks, which could help with the adoption of cargo bikes in particular. I think there's about 10,000 of these across London now. People rent a space for £36 a year. There's enormous waiting lists for them. And they've started with cargo bike hangers as well. These are the sorts of things can help with mode shift and how we value the space on our streets. I think this scheme will help disincentivise commuters parking in Newtown, make more space available for residents, and prioritise space for people who need it most. And those are all really good things. So any space for questions there?
Thank you, Dylan. Questions? Yes, Councillor Upton.
Cool. Thank you, Dylan, like always. And my question would be, in your submission, you talked about how you support limiting the parking permit per households. And my challenge with that is, as you know, we've been building a house just only for few, and then when big families struggle. Yeah. And there are a family of 8 examples that I know. How do you think those kind of family will be impacted if you permit 1 per household?
Yeah, so look, different places do this in different ways. In Singapore, there's a hard limit on the number of cars on the island of Singapore, and before you can buy a car, you need to buy one of those permits. It's much like a taxi, buying a share in a taxi company. You need to buy one of those permits first before you can actually buy a car. In Japan, you can't buy a car unless you've got off-street parking, and Tokyo is a lovely city to walk and cycle around despite being the biggest population in the world. There's different ways of solving these problems. Large families, yes, it is an issue, but there's different vehicle types like vans, which could be suited as one van can carry a family of that size, and then have bikes for the single people trips that need to be carried out otherwise. I think there's lots of other ways of approaching these problems. Vehicle car share vans could be another way of doing it as well. There's lots of potentials there.
Just a
First people to have problems with cars and parking,
Yeah, just follow up to that. And sorry, Madam Chair. Follow up to that is, how do you respond to people who say that if you live next door to where the border is not there, and you will be forced to this, and then the next neighbour has got all the freedom?
Yeah, and there's been some talk about that in Berempore, because Berempore doesn't have Newtown's problems. Well, Berempore's going to have more of Newtown's problems when people choose to park more in Berempore than they do in Newtown at the moment, right? So the problem's going to be pushed out from these centres. So yeah, I think that we need this type of thing rolled out to a lot more areas in the city, which I think would be the natural course over time.
Thank you, and we are out of time. But thank you very much, Dylan.
Appreciate your work. Thank you.
Next is Shelley. Welcome, Shelley. Right, okay. Now you might need to turn your mic on because we've got a few people online.
Thank you.
And although it's normally 5 minutes as you're representing a group, we'll make it 10. But that does need to include questions, so leave a bit of time.
Yes, of course. So any other submissions that are submitted by individuals are as an individual capacity, such as myself, I will be presenting personally later today. I just wanted to make that clear. The proposed parking scheme is made up of your rules, and we see why you chose them. But I plan to show you how it will impact us, others in the community, like those in social housing at each end of the street, visitors to the zoo, the athletics track, and even council employees working at the facility behind the track. Ultimately, it makes all of our lives more difficult, solving no problems. Firstly, councillors, I want to apologise that you have not been given an accurate picture of our street, literally. Up on here, which was included in the proposal, you'll see what they're showing is on-street parking in green. That's incorrect. The red dots that I've placed on the map here represent the driveways and garages on Roy Street, which eliminate a number of on-street parking spaces. The yellow dots are yellow lines, so that's where spaces are too small for a car to be parked as well. Making decisions based on inaccurate data is why we requested a meeting between Roy Street residents and the council. Combined, we have over 400 years' experience of parking challenges and behaviours on our street, but this request was declined. Under the proposed scheme, we as residents are being asked to pay $195 a year for residents' parking. Let me make this very clear. It is not residents' parking, is it? Because there's no designated space for residents. We have to share with everybody else, so it's not residents' parking. It's no different from what we currently have, yet we're expected to pay $195 for the privilege. Between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m, we will continue to share the spaces with short-term visitors, which is what we do right now. After 8 p.m. and before 8 a.m, when the 3-hour limitations do not apply, we will continue to struggle for a car park as cars who have not paid the residents' parking permit fee and may not even live on the street are free to park with no time restrictions. And we struggle to park in the evenings. Your own data shows 100% occupancy after 6 p.m. So why have no time restrictions after 8 p.m? when your own data showed that we're overflowing at that time? Your data showed 81% occupancy during the day, and this is probably true at times. Last week, a bus even managed to park on our street during the day, except, of course, if there is an event like the Newtown Fair, Gold Coin Zoo Day, an athletics event, or even just a sunny day. Forget about finding a park. You can expect you can expect illegally parked cars as there's not enough parking facilities in the area. And that happens every single time there is a school athletics event, a national, a regional. a busy zoo day because it's a sunny day. We really are concerned that the council may have grouped us in with the parking behaviour at the hospital. Obviously, the hospital is peak hours during the day and quiet during the evening, and we're literally the opposite of that, which is what makes Roy Street a little bit unique, because we are a little bit different to the rest of Newtown. If you look on Google Satellite, which is just any old day of the week, there are no available car parks on this street. And that's pretty much what our street looks like normally. This past Thursday to Sunday was the National Track and Field competition. The council placed road cones down Roy Street to prevent parking in the middle of the street, as they do for most large events, because the council know the parking available is not sufficient. For some reason this year, they didn't do it for the Newtown Fair. And this is what our street looked like on the day of the Newtown Fair. And the cars all parked in the middle of the street, went all up round the corner, up towards the zoo as well, illegally parked. But never fear, parking wardens came and made sure the fairgoers had a miserable end of their fair day and ticketed them all. Oh, but even a Wellington City Council car couldn't find a park that day and parked illegally in the middle of the street too. Yes, we love our street, we love the facilities, and most of all, we love the diversity. We as a community try to bring manaakitanga to our community and visitors. We want to engage and we want to share our knowledge of the area, but we were told the decision is now with councillors. That's why I'm here pleading today. You are accountable for providing adequate parking for council facilities or council-funded facilities, and that does not include punishing rate-paying residents who live in the area. Prior to 2010, the council was future planning, and a resource consent was approved for a 120 to a 240 car park facility at Newtown Park. If this had been built, none of us would even be here today. But the resource consent expired and no construction was begun. Also, since then, council has approved a number of multi-storey apartments in Newtown which have no parking facilities, meaning more pressure on the area. Under the scheme, we as residents have been told we will not be guaranteed a permit, and even if you get one, the next year is not guaranteed. So from 8 AM to 8 PM, we'd have to move our cars every 3 hours. If you get a permit, cars will not have a visual permit displayed, so there's no way of knowing who does and doesn't have a permit and who is and isn't parked illegally. Visitors' permits won't have a display either. The council proposes restricting the number of visitors we're allowed on Roy Street every year as well. More punishment for being a rate-paying resident. And like I said, no one will know who's parked legally or not because there's no visual permit being proposed. Councillors, we understand probably better than anyone that something needs to be done to show better manaakitanga to our guests and residents, and we strongly believe the current proposed parking scheme is not the answer. Within our submission, we've suggested a number of solutions. Please read this if you haven't already. There's 235 parks in the immediate vicinity to Roy Street, yet 197 of them is not included in the current boundary. Another simple solution is better signage for facility guests, so for zoo guests and athletics track, to find available parking. But ultimately, we all need better parking. Wellington City Council can do better for residents, visitors, ratepayers, through better consultation, use of knowledge and planning, resulting in better respect and empathy. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you. And we do have a question from Councillor Calvert.
yes.
Yep, sorry, my
Councillor Chung.
submission, but you just talked about a car park building. When was that? I've just missed that bit
We personally bought our house in 2010, and when we got the LIM report, we contacted the council to find out what resource consents were happening in the area, because at the time there was major construction going on at the council flats. We have council flats at both ends of the street, and there was major construction, so we were a bit concerned about that. And one of the resource consents was for a car park of 120 to 240 car parks, and that came from the council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much for this. Well, you were saying that even if you have a residence parking permit, the spaces aren't reserved for you, but they're marked as residence parking only.
No, they're not. No, it's a shared parking space. So the proposal proposes that they're limited 3-hour parking spaces, and so they're not actually designated residence parking spaces. It's exactly the same as what we had. We will be sharing the space with short-term parkers. We don't have a designated space. That's not been proposed at all.
Great, thank you. I'll look into this. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Rogers.
Kia ora, thank you very much for coming in today. You sort of talked about some of the issues that you were having before we proposed these changes. I was wondering, I mean, there seems to be a lot of international evidence that suggests providing more parking encourages more people to park and therefore makes it more difficult to park. Was there any other sort of considerations that you had around how you might ease the issues of finding a park in Roy Street?
Well, I think when you've got so many council facilities in the area and you've got the social housing at each end of the street, there's a number of additional visitors or residents that come in the evening. We often find a lot of Uber cars and taxis parked on the street in the evenings, and we have shift workers that come home very late at night and have to park at the top of Manchester Street to actually find a park. So more parking spaces. You have a zoo that you have thousands of people visit every year, and I understand that you're just a funder of that and it's not officially a council facility, but you heavily fund that. But then the athletics track as well. And as residents, we almost find it quite cruel that we don't want the illegal parking in the middle of the street, but then to put the cones down the middle of the street and you've got visitors and they come and they have nowhere to park. And I mean, they're major facilities that don't have parking facilities. That's what it is. I mean, you look at somewhere like the stadium. They built the stadium and they made sure there was parking facilities there for them, but there just isn't anything. But obviously a previous council thought that it was needed.
Thank you, Shelley.
No problem.
Thank you for all that information. It's
All right.
appreciated. Marion, hello. Welcome. 5 minutes is the...
Kia ora
norm.
tātou. I'm Dr. Marianne Layton. I come and present these things as on behalf of Doctors for Active Safe Transport, and I'm here bringing you, lots of evidence and lots of solutions as to how we can make our streets safer and better for our health. However, this time I come with a personal problem and I don't have a solution, but I would love to continue the conversation about it. As many of you know, I decided 4 years ago to actually give up my car, which is not always the easiest solution. But in order to be not part of the problem in Wellington's congestion and parking issues. But that means that I share a car. I share cars with all sorts of people. I borrow cars off people because every now and then a car is the best tool for the job. And sometimes I have that car parked on the street for a week, maybe 2 weeks. Overall, it's probably just, 3 months out of 12. So way less car use in total than if I had my own car. Your current parking proposals mean people in my situation are going to lose out. I can't get a parking permit because I can't give you one number plate. Maybe I could buy 6, 10 parking permits for, $2,000 or $3,000 for all the different parking number plates that I might borrow or rent or, use during the year. But when I do have a car for a week, I can't park in the 3-hour parking spots, and the small number of just empty, available for all parking spots, say 15 or sometimes 30% of the spots, are going to be realistically taken up by all the people who've got 2, 3, 4 cars per household and who can't get a residence parking permit. The reason I bring it to your attention is I would like to think that you're going to be wanting to encourage people to share cars, to have fewer cars, maybe 3 or 4 cars between 10 households, rather than 1 car per household or 2 or 3 cars per household, which is what we currently have. If we have a long-term aim of reducing the parking congestion in our city, we've got to encourage other ways of using cars, because while the bike is fabulous, sometimes I just need a car, and sometimes everyone just needs a car. But we know we don't all need a car all the time, because otherwise we wouldn't have all these cars parked on the street all the time. So I would love to continue a dialogue that will find a solution for this problem. I mean, I've nutted out various things. I did put some things in my written submission that maybe we could find ways around this. Nothing's come forward in the plan you've put out so far. It leaves me just kind of attempting to vaguely find my own way through this using my visitor parking permits, moving the car every 3 hours, goodness knows what. I mean, maybe you just want me to use Mevos because you've got a stake in Mevos, but they're not always the cheapest solution if I need a car for a couple of weeks. Please hear my plea. Please encourage car sharing, and please let's see if we can work out a way that actually builds on this sort of car ownership that doesn't have a single car per person or a number of cars per household. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. That's really interesting that you've identified that gap. Do you see other gaps that we need to think about, like trade vehicles or, large delivery vehicles or motorbike parking or covered bike parking? Do you see some of the other gaps?
Yeah, as you probably know, I definitely see a gap for covered bike parking. I brought that up before. In order for a lot of people in Wellington who don't have easy walk-on access to their houses. Lots of us live up steps and zigzags and all the rest of it. They'd love to have a bike, but they've got nowhere to keep it. And the reality is that just leaving it lying around on the street is not a goer. So we need somewhere that people who don't have a place they can store a bike to be able to do it. And I think that is somewhere council could help. We'd still get more bikes per square centimetre than we do cars. So it would be in your interest. And other cities have successfully put in lockable bike storage. And the whole issue around what are tradespeople going to do is really important. As I say, when a car is the best tool for the job, that is when a car is needed. And I think in a city like Wellington, we need to be prioritising the people for whom a car is the best tool for the job. And sometimes, that's tradespeople, people who need to shift big things, who need to move things around, who have disabilities, who have, a pack of 8 small children, whatever. There are times in life when you need a car, times in life when you don't. We do know that a lot of cars sit on the road for 90% of their time, not being used, because then, it's still easier for people to have their own car. And when they do need it, they can hop into it. But those are the people that we should be encouraging to car share. So that we free up parking spaces for putting in, bike lockers and for allowing for having enough space for the people who actually need a car all the time at this moment in their life. Of course, other key things to that are, for instance, people who have work vehicles that they then use for private use, parked in places that take up private spaces. So you do need to have some way this might be just in the too hard basket of preventing freeloading, because one of the things that really undermines social cohesion is people seeing other people freeloading and getting something that they don't have, and then they will fight to have back what they perceive they've lost. So it is really important that whatever you put in looks like it's fair, as well as working for the individual local communities. At the Residents Association on Monday night, we did also discuss whether we delay the Newtown parking for another year or two to help the hospital sort out its issues. I would say I've been discussing the hospital and its parking issues for 25 years. They will not sort out their issues until they are forced to do so.
Okay.
So,
Marion, we are out of time.
Okay.
But thank you very much for that really, detailed feedback. It's useful. Thank you. Right, we need to keep moving. So, Justin, thank you, Marion. Justin, welcome, and it's 5 minutes, and you're very,
Thanks.
Floor is yours.
Talk, I guess, about the lack of evidence-based decision-making present here, and then also about Berempore. So, I've got a slide deck. Not sure if it's going to be displayed, but effectively, I think Principle E of the parking policy says that support local area-based parking plans where there is evidence-based need and community support, and obviously the implementation needs to be evidence-based. In the agenda pack for the meeting in 3rd November, it was clear that residents are the highest priority, and the claim was also made that the scheme aligns with the principles in the parking policy, but I just want to show how it doesn't, I guess. 2B was the 3rd worst assessed option in the analysis by Abley, and option 13 was selected, which was a mixture of coupon and permit, residence permit spaces, and And then there was a second round of analysis where, again, I think option 13 was the best option and option 2 was the worst option. But officers discarded, and this is from, I guess, their own sort of notes, all options that were not reasonably practical or did not meet the outcome. But ably had very carefully considered the parking policy and the outcomes. And in fact, schemes that were ruled out included the one that's in operation in Mount Victoria and the one that's in operation on Adelaide Road by the Basin. The agenda noted that after a second round of analysis, the preferred option became option B, 2B. This kind of implies that there was a correlation between those events, but there wasn't. The reason that 2B was chosen was that officers decided that options 13 and 14 needed to be unilaterally discarded because they did not want to introduce coupon parking. And they note in the economic business case that options 13 and 14 extend the zone for paid parking into the suburban area. This would have been subject to a separate council approval through a long-term engagement process. And that's the reason mainly why they were discarded. So option 2B was not in any round of analysis the best proposal. It was only the proposal identified because 11 options were rejected as not meeting the needs or not practical, even though they were in place in other parts of the city. And then the other 2 options, which were better performing, were ignored because officers did not want to go through the time process of extending the coupon zone. And that just seems to be the short of it. And it's very despicable, I think, that they tried to present a link between the analysis and the outcome and choosing of 2B when this doesn't exist, and that I guess they were comfortable presenting that misconception through to councillors. Going over to Berhampore, we don't have a problem with commuters in Berhampore. We've got a problem because the bike lane is going to take away so many parks. Now, there are no parking in Berhampore that's going to be for residents. There's only going to be mixed. So the short-term parkers will be allowed to park anywhere they like for free anytime, and residents will then get, I guess, the right to stay longer if they want, but only if they can find a park in the first place. Crucially, the greatest need in South Berhampore, where I live, with a lot of parks are coming off Adelaide Road for the cycle lane, is on Saturday mornings when people come to Wakefield Park. And yet, priority has been given to those out of suburb people, the sea tuners coming to the bakery, the Karori parents coming to the football, over residents. And that's clearly in breach of the parking policy priority. And I understand you can do what you like, but don't present it as being residents prioritised, because we're not being prioritised. We're being forced to pay for a spot that the only other people who use those parks can park them for free whenever they like. So I'm just really disappointed, I guess, in the whole process. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why there's such strong anti-sentiment, because it's been done really badly. There's been no analysis to inform the decision. There's been misconception of facts, and it doesn't...
Could you just be a little bit cautious with claiming that one?
My opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I hope you present the evidence.
Yes,
But if you just go back and say, does this scheme adhere to the parking policy? Does it prioritise residents parking over short-term parkers? No, it doesn't at all. There's not one park in Berhampore that isn't available for a short-term parker. Not one. And there are lots of parks where residents, obviously, who have to pay for the privilege to compete for those spots. And there's no community support, and there's a lack of evidence. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. I think we probably have run out of time for questions, but thank you for that. Those views.
I should be concerned about the way the information was presented to you by your officers, because it wasn't reflective of the facts.
Okay, well, thank you for giving us your viewpoint. Thank you. Right, so we'll move on to Jenny. Is that Jenny? Yeah, hi Jenny, welcome. So we have 5 minutes, and that does need to include questions if you wish questions, to be able, councillors to ask you questions. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I've had difficulty getting logged in, so I'm not quite as organised as I was earlier. So I'm just going to set a timer because I can't see yours, and would like to allow time for questions. So I am a mobility parking parking badge holder and mobility park user. I'm on Rintoul Street. The mobility park outside the doctors has now been time restricted. So if I park there during the day, I've got a time restriction. And if I am there in the evening, I have to get off there in the morning, which just isn't possible for me. So I just wanted to flag how important the second mobility car park on Rintoul Street is to me, which is over near the community centre. I am concerned about the lack of time restrictions on the weekends because of the number of hospital workers that have been parking on the street, particularly since it became a regional hospital. And so they'll still be coming into work on the weekends, and that might put less parking available to residents on the weekends if we get those hospital visitors, commuters back here parking. The mobility parking permit discussion around whether there would be any charge for mobility parking badge users to pay for a parking permit. I would really appreciate if there wasn't a fee for that. There's so many barriers to transport already. It would be great if the discussions around that did turn into a decision to not charge. Because I don't own a vehicle, family lend me a vehicle when I have an appointment, say at Lower Hutt Hospital. We figure out what the best plan is, and so I don't consistently have the same vehicle to park. So I'd like to know about the ease of changing what car I'm using the permit in. And I think having a review really quickly once these parking changes are made, because I'm already noticing the impact of just having lost about 4 parks on this block since the disability car parking changes were made outside the doctors. Some parks have been taken away. There's more yellow lines in the area. So a quick review would be appreciated to see how we're all going with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Now, do we have questions? Yeah, one from Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Jenny, and thank you so much. And yes, the mobility one is important to make it free. And it's also, I wonder if you support making it half price for community card holders and leisure card holders.
Yes, I mean, I know what the financial pressure is living on that level of income, so yes, definitely.
Another quick question is, some of the residents on Rintoul Street, they will be very limited car park, and is that something the resident will support if we make it for the Rintoul Street residents free of parking, since there are just not going to be enough parking only in that street?
Yeah, I mean, there's not enough parking now. The parking, I've been here for over 20 years. The parking issues got significantly worse over time, and particularly once it became a regional hospital. And I mean, for example, I borrowed my son's car a couple of nights ago. I waited 30 minutes on Rintoul Street before I was able to get a car park. Last week I waited 40 minutes before I was able to get a car park. So it just is so time pressured already in terms of being able to park easily, and that's only going to get worse. And I've already noticed it get worse, and you've only taken 4 parks away, and you're going to be taking away every car park on my side of the street.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Chung.
I sort of have a question for council officers before I answer your question. Why do we not have residents parking?
I don't think this isn't the forum to ask questions of officers. That comes after we've heard from the residents.
Okay.
I do have a question for you, Jenny. If do you think it's fairer to be able to give more people 1 permit, or to let people have up to 2?
I mean, the change in the years that I've lived here is significant in the number of vehicles per household. And a lot of that's to do with families no longer living in the larger houses, but groups of tenants. And so I've had situations where there might be 5 vehicles for 1 flat, and that really has had a significant impact when those situations have arisen. That's not the case at the moment, but I think there's lots of reasons why people will have more than one vehicle, and it's a bit hard to judge fairness because everyone's circumstances are unique.
Such a good answer. But thank you. I'm very interested in your perspective on that. I think we have run out of time, but thank you again for coming and speaking to us. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
So, Simi. Oh, okay. So we've actually had just a couple of people not able to come. So Andrew, if you're here, we can hear you now.
5 minutes is probably not enough time to point out all the issues with this proposal, but
we may be able to be a tiny bit lenient, but it won't be 15 minutes.
yeah, I will do my best. Okay, so this is not workable. It's not a solution to anything, let alone the issues or problems that that are faced. There's nothing new here, and there's no sensible ideas. Is it fair? No. Locals will pay for free parking for all. Does it fix demand? No. Does it give council any money? No. Apparently it's cost neutral according to your letter. Does it address residents' issues? No. Does it help Newtown visitors or workers? No. Does it provide sufficient parking for residents? No. Does it benefit locals in any way? No. In fact, it will probably make things worse. These ideas will not work as you don't understand the actual problems or specific issues. Demand is stated in this letter, but what's caused the demand? That's what you haven't addressed. Everything that you've done here will reduce demand, and Economics 101 suggests that will, so everything you've done here will reduce supply. Economics 101 suggests that will increase demand. I bike to work. I do what you want me to do, but I also need a car. If I don't have a car park, it's going to force me into the road. That's going to force my car onto the road, or I'll get fined. That's going to waste more time for me, more money. It's going to pump more carbon into the air. The money that I would have spent in the city on lunches will go on fuel, possibly parking. I also have no faith in what you have done with, or how you have come up with the numbers. Do you know how many car park spaces there are in these areas? Do you know how many car parks are actually required by residents in these numbers? I suspect you don't, because they're not individually marked. One car will often take up 2 car parking spaces. Where did the 70% come from that you've decided to have as 3-hour limited parking? How did you work out 70% as the correct number? Or was it plucked from thin air? Ditto the 85%. How did you come up with 85% as being the correct number for residents? Again, was it just plucked out of thin air? If you consider 85% of the 70% that you are removing for residents, that means that more than 40% of the current residents' available parking from ratepayers will be removed. How did you know that 60% of the spaces is what the numbers for the residents are required? Could I see you working out in your numbers, please? What's more, of the 60% of the remaining parks, and if you've managed to actually get a car parking permit, it will only provide preference for the space for approximately 50% of the time. 50% of the hours in the week. Considering the free weekends, the 8 to 8 time limit and 3 hours free parking, that's 50% of the time which is gone. What have you solved? What is the value for money? You say that only 54 cents a day is what it's going to cost. I think you've used some council math on this one. 54 cents if you divide by 7. There's 2 free days, so you divide it by 5, that's 75 cents. You consider the 5 day, you consider that there's only 50% of the time, and you double it. That is $1.50 a day that it's costing. Well done. That's 178% wrong. Are you trying to mislead? Are you trying to lie to us? Or have you just got the numbers wrong again? Add that $1.50 a day to the $4 in interest and mortgage, rent, $3.40 for rates a day, $3 for food, $1 for transport, $3.50 for insurance. That's $17 a day, and that's a light estimate, of which $5 a day would go to the council. And Wellington is not worth what I currently pay, let alone another $5. Visitors permits are bizarre. When I read this, I can only assume you have got this backwards. You are saying that someone that is adding to the demand is allowed twice the number of visitors. If you have no off-street parking, you can get 50 free permits. If you have off-street parking, you're allowed only 25. The person that is adding to the problem gets to add more by having twice as many visitors. It makes no sense. This will also end my relationship. My partner does not live with me. She needs to come and park there for longer, but I have to ask permission of the council by activating a parking permit the day before a visit. This is strange. I don't know what kind of social engineering you're after, but I will have to move house to maintain this relationship, and I'm not the only one in this situation. So these are some things I want you to consider. User pays for the people that come into the environment. Currently on Hanson Street, there's a greenbelt parking. You've put 3-hour parking in there, and it is empty during the day. I've only ever seen during the day 7 cars use that space. There's 29 extra car parking spaces. Charge the hospital workers for the parking permit to go there. Currently it's not used. Mark out the car parking spaces for efficient use of the space. That will also gain about 7 or 8 car parking spaces in my street alone. If you do not have a driveway, why don't you make that space outside the house available to that property as if it did have a driveway? I could put in a driveway. It's park neutral. I wouldn't have to pay for a car parking permit, or I would pay for the parking permit. It's the same space I've used, just whether or not I've got an off-street park.
Andrew, I've just, if you can, just make a few last comments.
Yep. So these are ideas, and painting the number is cheap, and it's self-policing, because I will let you know that someone needs to be towed or ticketed. So instead of your proposal, what I think I have done is I have addressed demand. I've found you 37 more car parking spaces in my street. I've saved money. I've allowed you to get money. I've allowed you to find people. I've addressed equality, and I have addressed the demand issue. I've also saved my relationship. This rubbish won't work. It won't fix the problems. It's a horrendous, complicated, unworkable, unintelligent mess, and please do not implement any of it.
That's been very well thought through, and thank you for all that information you presented to us. Right, we'll move on to Amanda. Amanda's Lynette. Is she here? Hello. Is that Lynette? Would you like to come early? Is that okay? We've just got a couple of people who, for one reason or another, don't seem to be here, so you're very welcome to speak to us now if you'd like to. Or Jackie is online. Oh, Jackie's here. Okay, so Lynette, are you ready? Yes, if you would like to come up now, that would be really great. And you can either choose the podium or you're welcome to sit at the table, whatever makes you feel more comfortable and relaxed.
I'll probably burble on because I'm not very
that's
prepared. I own a property in Adelaide Road, and I just don't. I actually thought, yippee, they're going to have resident parks. You know, you can have 2 for the place. You know, right? That people will be able to park outside all the time, and nobody else will have those parks. Yippee! Because you can't get any parks ever when you go there. When I go to mow the lawns or take the rubbish away to the tip, I'm walking 100 yards up the street with bags of rubbish, big black bags and rakes and all sorts of things, because you can never get near it. And so Yippee was wrong, because I read it again, and it looks like it still remains Park 180, and you only get to almost use it almost the same after paying a residence fee of $200 a year, almost the same. Is that correct? That you only get to use the Park 80 thing outside your house? And in the afternoons, they're still parked with people for 3 hours, the whole 3 parks outside. and you don't even get a show in. The tenants won't and don't, and even at night time it says that they are allowed to use it from 5 p.m. to 11 a.m. in the morning. Anybody's allowed to use it. Am I understanding it right or am I wrong? And then they're allowed to use it till 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. in the morning. Is that correct? Is everybody allowed to use it till then? It's not going to be the people that live inside the house is really the resident parker at all. So what's the use of paying for a resident park because you're really not getting anything for your money? You're supposed to chase down the road if you can't get one outside your place for another park, 180 to see if you can get it. And I've been there and you just can't find a park because I'm always carrying rubbish, bags and black rubbish up the road, sometimes 12 bags, and putting them in my car and running back and getting the rakes, and it's crazy. And then the other thing was, now I know that if I ever try to get a tradesman, how's a tradesman, a plumber, or a or an electrician going to come to my house and then find they can't get a park, so they're just going to drive away and send me a bill for coming? So I just think the whole thing is quite crazy. I tell you, I don't know. I can't think what else to say about it. It's just, it's like owning a property that you can't even get a park for your tenant outside, let alone yourself to go and do any work on it. It's never been like that before, it's nuts. And even if I got a resident park, I can't get one for myself. Only the tenant can actually get it with their car number on it. And then the greedy one downstairs might take the 2 parks and the one upstairs won't get one at all. And then it's not even their park because it's still shared by the rest, what I've just said to you. It's shared by everybody. So it's quite disappointing, really. Quite upsetting, really.
We do have some questions if you'd like to use your time to have a question or two.
Am I right that the park 180 is everybody's from 5 to, 11 a.m. in the morning, or otherwise from 8 to 8 a.m. in the morning? And
I think so, but
it doesn't belong to the person who actually...
I think so, but this isn't really a forum for us to answer your questions. Sadly, it's more a forum for you to give us information.
And then it says that the weekends are everybody's, so it's still not the tenant that lives there. It's hell for them, so why would they want to rent your place? Why would they? If they've got a car, they wouldn't, would they? Not really.
So, Lynette, we do have a question for you from Councillor Chung. Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much, Lynette. I've really enjoyed your presentation. If we actually had a sign there saying residents parking only, would that resolve the major part of your problem, so that only residents parking can actually stop there?
Resident parking only, would it resolve the problem? It would if the landlord was in charge of it, because they would give the park to the person upstairs would get one and one of them downstairs would get one. But if you've got them typing in their little thing on their internet thing or whatever you call it, because I'm computer illiterate, to say that there's their car number, they could greedily actually pinch the 2 of them and the upstairs one would get nothing, wouldn't they? But whereas if the landlord was the one that was in charge of it, they could delegate one to the one downstairs and one to the one upstairs. It's still not enough. It's not enough parking, but, I don't know. Yeah, and as for the tradesman going, they said that the tradesman can turn up and use 3 hours of the park at 180, and if he's over and he has to be there all day, it's like the tenant is the one that's meant to push in the visitors thing. And as if they want to do that for the landlord, they don't want to give the landlord anything.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. We have run out of time, but I think you have given us a bit of food for thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That doesn't work either, because the tenant doesn't want to assist the landlord in getting the plumber or the electrician, do they, by putting the visitors pass?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynette.
Right, so now Jackie. Have we got Jackie? Oh, we've got more than just Jackie.
Kia ora.
That's
My
lovely.
name's Jackie and this is Nikki. I'm a nurse specialist and Nikki's a specialty clinical nurse and Jane is also our ward administrator. So we've come on behalf of the neonatal intensive care unit.
We have a 5-minute slot to, which is woefully inadequate to...
We'll probably be able to be a bit flexible because we have had 1 or 2 people not come.
Okay, so we really want to address the staff parking at the hospital. We are nurses, we want to come to work, we want to nurse, we want to look after our patients, we want to be at work timely. We have families. I think the message I want to give you is that in 2018 to 2022, nurses told the government that the pay needed to be addressed, that the working conditions needed to be addressed. And you will recall Andrew Little, the Minister of Health, said at the time, there is no health crisis, but there was, but we weren't listened to. I'd like you to listen to us. So then we have roughly 200 nurses, over 50 nurses left to go to Australia. Those 50 were probably, no disrespect to my colleague, but they were probably the younger ones that we spent a lot of time training up. To train up a nurse to be ventilator competent takes 5 years. So they've left and we were very short. Some shifts we had 9 nurses short. You guys just better sort out your preventative medicine and make sure you don't get sick because it's just not going to be the nursing staff. I don't think you realise that. I know it's not necessarily your problem, but it does need addressing. Last year we had 34 new nurses start, international nurses, with 31 out of that 34. We were grateful that they came to help us, but they're not New Zealand trained. They don't nurse like we nurse. They are very good nurses, but we're a nurse-led unit. So, for example, one of the nurses, when you say you need to bath your baby you're looking after, she said, oh, well, ask a doctor. Well, we don't ask a doctor to bath the baby, so we have a lot of cultural issues to address. After lunch, we turn off the lights so the parents can do a kangaroo cuddle. So babies can smell the mum to learn to breastfeed the milk, hear the heart rate. And this nurse said, yes, we turn off the electricity too, but that's to save power. So there's a whole lot of different cultural issues to come across. We just want to keep New Zealand nurses. We want to train New Zealand nurses and keep them here. We don't want to be training New Zealand nurses to go to Australia. We don't want to be training international nurses. We had lots of amazing Filipino nurses. They've all gone to Australia. So if you don't address the parking, that is what's going to happen. We don't make enough money. Parking's expensive. We have children, parents are nurses, other way around, nurses are parents. They've got school commitments after school to get children from here to there. When we came and talked to the council at the meetings at the hospital, you know, they said, like Uber. How can you Uber someone to Miramar for the soccer and someone to Koori for netball? We have to live and we want to be a good nurse. So I'll let Jax talk now. Oh, Jane.
Okay. Kia ora koutou. My name's Jane. I'm ward administrator. I've worked at NICU for 5 years, and although I'm not a nurse or doctor, my work is skilled. I am paid less than the average wage for what I do, and that, of course, has a bearing on my transport options. However, when my husband turned 65 recently, he used most of his KiwiSaver to buy us an electric car. So I drive from the northern suburbs to the hospital in my electric car. My point is, I think that's a good thing to do, but it's an individual solution. And my problem with this is largely political. I feel that I'm a Green voter. I feel that this isn't a progressive move in any real sense because it's putting responsibility for our traffic problems, climate change issues, problems of lack of urban planning. It's laying it back on individuals to solve, and to be honest, in our case, largely working women who have complex jobs and families. And the fact is that if we drive a long way to start our shift at 7 o'clock, we need to have somewhere to park. Public transport is not an option. We start 12-hour shifts at 7 o'clock. We go, for most of the year, we go to work in the dark and we come home in the dark. Now, so the solutions to these problems, and there has to be a solution, I agree, there has to be a solution, but they have to be systemic solutions, like first building a comprehensive, reliable, fast public transport system that's available to us to get us to work when we start at 7 o'clock in the morning. Like making streets safe for women, like all the nurses who are walking to public transport. Like solving the fact that there isn't enough housing in the central city. But that has to be done first, to lay the responsibility and the trouble, huge problems onto us as individuals, as working women, as the solution to these systemic problems is unjust. It's inequitable. We are women who have less power, less income, less safety on the streets, and we have to be able to get to work, to do our complex jobs in the time that we're there. So I'd just like to say, as a Green-Red voter, that this is not a progressive solution for me and for my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, so we probably have used up the normal allocation of time.
I just wanted to voice my concerns.
But we can allow a little bit of leeway, and also I think there will be at least a couple of questions. So
my main concern is around the safety of nurses going to their cars. You've talked about extending out the parking zone. The majority of people that are parking on the streets are our junior nurses. When I did a survey of them all today, and so the further out they're parking, the more at risk they are. They're going at times of night and winter time where it is dark, and that's my main concern around that. Because I live in Mount Cook and Nikki lives in Berempore. I've got electric bikes. We walk everywhere, so it's not that we're very pro-green and really want this to work, but actually we've got a tertiary hospital that needs nurses, and we need also patients to be able to have access to that tertiary hospital. And at the moment, 5 out of 15 of my nurses were all parking under the hospital car park today because there's no parking available. And that's patient parking. So that means patients will be late for our outpatient appointments. That means it ripples onto the fact that you're wasting precious time of consultant appointments. So anyway, thank you for listening to us.
So we do have some questions. So Councillor Calvert.
The issues that you've outlined, would you say that's right across all the hospital wards, all the different areas?
Yeah, so Nikki and I have been nursing for over 30 years, and Nikki's probably over 40 years.
Hospital since 1980.
The safety of nurses at all different shift ranges is huge. So there's a lot of nurses who might work sort of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 like myself, who have that luxury, but however, there's a lot that don't. The predominant nursing is they work shift work, and it's also rostered and rotating, so you might build up a routine of getting up at 5 in the morning, getting on your bike and going to work. However, next minute you're on night shift and you're dealing with the sleep, lack of sleep, I should say, but the safety is massive in the hospital, and I get that as Wellington City Council, it's not necessarily all your problem. However, we know that the hospital is completely underfunded and we need a tertiary hospital. So,
Thank you. Just a question from me. Is the parking at the moment adequate? Like the situation right now?
Completely not. So every year staff have to apply for the parking. They can put in requisitions. So those that are from Kapiti, we've got a lot of staff who are from the Kapiti region. Wainui is huge. And so there is completely not enough adequate parking, and you've got to bid every year. So there's this nervousness. So there was another 5 people out of our unit today said that they would resign if they don't get parking permit, and that they'll be notified in April. So that's 5 people.
So you've got your hospital provided parking, but then there's street parking.
Yep.
But what you're saying is the totality of it isn't enough.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. And I think we'll take one more question from Councillor Chung, but.
Just a very quick question. You would have heard an earlier speaker speaking about Hanson Street having plenty of parking. Would that be? Do you consider that would be too far to walk from the hospital, from where you are?
No, not at all. However, there is quite a lot of homelessness. It seems to have improved a little bit lately, but at night time I would be quite concerned. Often I will be messaging my partner and travelling with my keys between my hand, and it's not uncommon that I will get spoken to in an abusive manner probably at least once a week at night, if I'm on night shifts. Yeah.
Fully understand. I understand. Thank you.
So Hanson Street is really close, and a lot of our nurses live in the apartments there as well. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you. That's been really useful. Thank you. This actually does bring us to an afternoon tea break. Now we're running more or less on time. So can we please be back at, 15-minute tea break and back at 2:45. Right. Hi, Liz. Nice to see you. Oh, here he is. Good. All right. We will carry on, and we've got the last of our submitters now. So, Shelley, welcome. So, you have 5 minutes, and that should include questions as you heard the first time when you were with us before.
Sure, I'll keep it brief. I'd like to request that we did stop calling it residence parking because it's not residence parking in the true form. So I think we should stop calling it that. Nothing actually changes from what we currently have, except that we're expected to pay $195 a year to fight for a parking space during the day with short-term visitors. And then at night time, it's a free-for-all where anyone, people that don't even live on the street, can come and park with no limitations until 8 a.m. So I think calling it residence parking is just false. Even if it was residents only parking on our street, I'm not sure there'd be enough spaces for all the residents on our street. A lot of the homes on our street have become renters, and so a number of them have multiple vehicles within the home. Some houses have 3 to 4 cars, I do believe. And Mevo still gets priority over residents and ratepayers. So even if we had residents parking and paid this $195 for 5 spaces, Mevo still has a higher priority than we do to stay there for as long as they like. Tradesmen, so we have old homes and we have leaky pipes. And there are often 2 to 3 tradesmen on our street. That would be impossible under the proposed scheme. Time restrictions for our guests visiting our zoos and our zoo and our athletics track. So the zoo is quite an expensive day out for a family, and they're often travelling some distance, and it's a trip to the zoo for the day. But what this scheme does is it limits a day to the zoo to 2.5 hours. By the time they park their car in a 3-hour parking limit, they go to the zoo and allow half an hour to get to and from the zoo. They're limited to 2.5 hours at the zoo, and the same goes with the athletics track. And if you have a child competing in athletics, well, sorry, you can't watch them in every event. You can only watch them in 2.5 hours worth of events. And I know it's a 3-hour car park, but the reality is you've still got to park and get there and get back to the park. I just want the council to remember that Newtown has the regional hospital, the regional zoo, the athletics track, and that's used by schools multiple days a year. It's used for regional and national events and club events. We have the football field behind the track. We have social housing at both ends of the street. And the Wellington City Council behind the track, which has multiple car parks, but by 7 a.m. that's full because the council workers all drive there, unload, hop on their trucks, and because the council base is there, hop on their trucks and go for the day. So there's no parks available there and it's full by council workers. I do think it's crazy that all these facilities have no designated parking available for it. I know I said before about the somewhere like the stadium, they built parking specifically, but instead we're surrounded by all these incredible facilities that we love so passionately. But the pressure is being put on the residents to provide parking for the council facilities. And we pay rates to have our pipes fixed and our roads fixed and have parking spaces, but you want us to pay $195 for half what we already have. Prior to 2010, I'll mention this again, Laura, because you weren't here, there was a resource consent in place for a car park for 120 to 240 cars at Newtown Park, because the council at the time realised that the facilities in the area needed their own designated parking space, but the resource consent expired and obviously construction never begun or we wouldn't be here today. I think these facilities need to be considered to have their own parking facilities, and then it would take the pressure off residents.
Thank you, Shelley. I was just having a chat with staff over the break. If how many residents do you think will actually take up the option to pay for a residence permit?
We'd be forced to, because otherwise we'd have to move our cars every 3 hours.
But apparently, I was just checking with staff, that's only the case between certain hours. After
that's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay.
So, for example, a lot of people work from home, which you know these days, so they'd have their car at home. My husband works from home and he rides to work every day and rides home from work, although he started running because he finds the cycle lanes dangerous. But you eliminate the ability to have working from home collaborations because someone can't come and work with you for the day and park in the facility. My elderly mother comes and stays with us once a week and she's 80, and it means that she can only come and visit. I would have to save my visited pass for my mother and nobody else. I would not be allowed a tradesman or a visitor for the rest of the year because I'm only allowed 50 visitors.
Okay. Right, I think that's answered it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Peter. Yeah. And as we previously said, you're very welcome to sit at the table if that's what you prefer. Have you turned your mic on? Yeah, thank you, Councillor
Thank
Chung.
you. Okay, you can all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Peter Kitchenman. I'm a resident of Roy Street and have been for 30 years. Roy Street is in Newtown South and adjacent to Newtown Park and the Wellington Zoo. Let's see if I can operate. Yes, I have 10 points that I want to speak to. Using 12 slides. The first point is that Wellington City Council have been aware for decades of the problems around the zoo and Newtown Park, and they've done nothing. They've done nothing to assist us. Not only have they done nothing, but they've actually made the problem worse, as I will show you shortly in this presentation. Also, the parking scheme that is being proposed does not address the specific needs around the Newtown South in the vicinity of the zoo and Newtown Park Stadium. The lived experience of residents in Roy Street and the surrounding streets is such that the occupancy rate for parks is approximately 100%, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And I've given a little bit more breakdown underneath the line there, but I don't want to go into that detail, it's there. Point 3, I want to introduce the concept of the commons. The commons is the cultural and natural resources accessible to all members of a society. These resources are held in common, even when owned primarily or publicly. The commons here are the non-restricted car parks on streets and other parking places in the vicinity. The following 2 slides show where Roy Street residents have been able to park for decades when the street became full due to visitors to the zoo and events at Newtown Park Stadium. However, in recent years, WCC has effectively destroyed the commons by either prohibiting parking or putting in place P240 restrictions at all times. So I want to show you one set of commons there at the end of Roy Street. For almost 3 decades that I've been there, 4 decades for other people here, you could park there. But 2 years ago, this council, without any consultation with residents, has started to restrict people from parking there and fined people, including myself. And there's another place in Newtown Park parallel to Roy Street. Point 4, before the parking scheme is approved, Roy Street residents request a meeting with WCC, with the mayor and councillors, to discuss possible parking solutions in the vicinity of the zoo and Newtown Park. With respect to the consultation you've carried out, it's been top-down. Discussions have been confined to a WCC proposed plan. It's been not enough time for obtaining official information. Granted, I came in at the second public consultation because I wasn't aware of the first one. The project manager is a good communicator, but she is constrained by the project schedule. Now, point 6, and I think you've probably heard it both this morning and this afternoon. The proposed scheme is likely to be divisive between residents and WCC and divisive among residents. Point 7, residents' parking is effectively being discontinued and being replaced with a permit for authorised vehicles. Residents may apply for an authorised vehicle exemption permit, but this is only valid Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. This does not address the parking needs of residents in the vicinity of the zoo and Newtown Park Stadium. There's an example of the sign that will likely go up in Wellington if this scheme goes forward. This is for Auckland. In Wellington, it'll be P180. The point is, residents' parking is being done away with. And I was surprised to hear one councillor here wasn't aware that residents' parking is effectively being done away with. And I'm pleased now you're aware of that. Right, cost comparison of parking permits. Per annum, I want to look at 4 cities. Auckland, $70. Christchurch, $102. Palmerston North is $0. Residents do not have to pay in a time-restricted zone in Palmerston North. And Wellington is $195. Why? Why is WCC's existing fee, never mind the proposed fee, almost 3 times the cost of Auckland? The final slide is, if this scheme is going to go ahead, and I hope it isn't, and you've heard quite a lot of negative feedback today, and we did in the first public consultation and maybe the second, if it's going to go ahead, I'm proposing a zero-cost fee to residents to park in P180 restricted places. The cost for running the scheme is recovered from the infringement fee for those who exceed the P180 time limit. And in this way, the commons are not monetised. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Peter. I think we've probably run out of time for questions, but thank you, it's very clear. And we also have your written submission to refer to, so thank you very much. I'd like to invite Paul to speak to us. Welcome, Paul.
Hello. I presume you can hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, good. I'm a resident of Kenwyn Terrace in Newtown. I've lived there for over 30 years. We were a family of 5, but the kids have now left home. So there's just my wife and I living in an old house in Kenwyn Terrace. And over those 30 plus years, I've noticed a big change in the number of cars in Kenwyn Terrace. It's sort of increased and increased and increased. So when we first moved in there, it was easy to get a car park. Now, as a resident, it's really difficult. And I'm actually in support of this this proposal because of the pressure of finding a car park in our street from day to day. And a lot of people, because it's got very good access down to the shops and in Newtown, a lot of people go there and park for the day. And so residents, if they come and go during the day, usually lose their car park and end up parking in Stoke Street or Trevor Terrace or something like that, which has happened to us several times. So as I said, I'm in favour of the scheme because I think it takes, hopefully, takes a bit of pressure off the car parking in the street and allows the residents to use it as it's supposed to be. The other thing about a lot of these inner city suburbs is that they weren't designed for motor cars. So very few of the cars have got, houses have got garages on them. So there is a lot of pressure on the street parking. So there are, I think in Kenwyn Terraces, 8 of the houses have off-street car parking. And I'd just like to use the example of our next door neighbour. I'm not saying that our next door neighbour would necessarily do this, but under the this sort of proposal, there is a potential. He's got three garages on his property. There's two flats and one so two household units on one property. And under the scheme that you're proposing, he could have use the three garages and then apply for 4 car parks, because you can have up to 2 per household. So he could get 7 car parks, which to me, we've only just got one car. We've always just had one car, and we hardly ever use it because Newtown is a fantastic suburb for public transport. We use public transport to go just about everywhere, unless we go up to visit friends or something somewhere else, or we go on holiday. So we've got one small car that we park in the street. And I know the neighbour has 2 cars per household already, and even if he doesn't use the garages, he's got 2 car parks in front of his his property, which no one else can use. So I'd just like to be sure that the allocation of car parks was fair, because otherwise you're going to get this ridiculous situation where someone can have 7 car parks and we only apply for 1. And it seems to be that my feeling is that it would be better if everyone in the street who lives there is entitled to 1 car park, and they have to pay $195 for that. But if they want a second car park for a second car, then maybe they pay another $195. I know this is going to be controversial, but pay another $195 or whatever for the second one, just to, because I know this is not mandated in your scheme, but it would be, because Newtown's so well provided for in public transport, it would be good to get people out of their cars and onto the buses and riding their bikes and walking, because that's what I've done for 30, 35 years. Caught the bus, walked into town, got an e-bike recently, used that all the time. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. So all everyone needs in the street is 1 car park, and that's it. You're fine. And so I think that to be fair, it should be just tweaked a little bit to make sure that some people don't get a whole lot of car parks and some other people only sort of get 1. It should be a fair distribution. And one car park should be automatically allocated per person.
Thank you. Paul, just a question. If people do have garages, which obviously take away on-street parking because you've got a driveway crossing, do you think there should be some reduction in their automatic right to have a on-street permit?
I think it should, yeah. I think they should at least have 1 car park less than everybody else. But,
Okay. Are there any other quick questions for Paul? Yes, Councillor Abdurrahman.
What do you think of, first of all, thank you for coming. What do you think of using their driveways as a car park?
Well, that's okay I mean, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is some of them use the driveway as a car park across the footpath. So we can't, my wife has a slight disability, and to get up and down the footpath sometimes is impossible, and we have to go out on the road. So the enforcement, I suppose, of people's parking habits needs to be tweaked up, particularly if this is coming into force. We're going to have parking wardens going through there every day and checking that people are, complying with your new rules. But it really annoys me that people park across footpaths. That's my
you're right.
Bugbear.
No, I wasn't meant to be on the footpath, actually. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, parallel's fine.
Yeah, parallels.
I don't have a problem with parallel.
All right, well, we probably have come to the end of your time, but thank you very much, Paul. It's nice to see you again. Yeah. Helen.
Kia ora. Well, I'm here again to speak with you on behalf of healthcare workers in our city.
There's no doubt that healthcare workers are supportive of efforts and system changes to make our city more environmentally friendly. We know more than anyone how important is protecting our society and environment for our tamariki and our future generations to come. But what we also know is important is that changes are made in due time. What I'm here to speak to you on is that if this proposal is enacted without adequate preparation, it may have detrimental impact on our healthcare system and the people of Piniki, which is already fragile as it stands. What we are calling for is simple. We are asking that before any proposal is put in place, we are guaranteed public transport that is reliable, accessible and affordable. We understand there have been improvements, yet given daily conversations reflect constant cancellations and regularly late services, which is extremely problematic issue when our healthcare workers are literally commuting to save lives, to participate in surgeries, and to provide constant care around the clock for our most vulnerable. Finally, we call for adequate parking for hospital staff, especially those who work outside of public transport hours, which is 2/3 of hospital staff. Realistically, our salaries do not support taking Ubers to work, and many of us are parents managing school drop-offs and other family responsibilities. We submitted a petition signed by over 400 very real and very concerned people, and this was reported on council website as one vote. Personally speaking, I have a 5 a.m. start, and the alternative to an 11-minute drive to work is a 50-minute walk down an unlit road without footpaths in pitch black, which quite frankly is unsafe. Living within 15 minutes of the hospital, I'm not entitled to a car park there. So I'm reliant on both my car and street parking to do my job. My understanding is anywhere up to 1,200 people are in a similar predicament. Please do not proceed with this plan until public transport and hospital staff parking are adequate. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Oh, you do have some time for questions. There may be some. Do we have any questions for Helen? Yes, Councillor Calvert, if you don't mind.
Thank you. When you said you've been here before, are you talking, sorry, and I can't remember exactly.
Previous submission.
Just before Christmas, was that around Newtown?
Yes,
was it just?
the first submissions.
Yeah, and your message is this
It's
similar?
consistent. It is the same.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have another one? Are you able to take another question? We have one from Councillor Abdurrahman.
Thank you. I remember you from the previous one. And let's say if this council decides to go ahead, which is not something that you're asking for, but if it goes ahead, one or two things that you would think is going to improve for the people that you advocate, tell us just one or two things that it can.
Just simply hospital staff need parking, and that will improve so much for residents, for staff.
There, can I ask a question? There could be the option of some parking, not a lot, but some, I think it was Hanson Street, is that right?
On Main Street, absolutely. But
Yeah, Main Street, we are trying to achieve that, but there could be some additional. And
it's not up to capacity. It's
No.
not at the moment, and definitely not up to 1,200 as it is.
what I was about to ask was, is Hanson Street too far away?
No, not at all.
In your opinion? Okay, that's useful to know.
Sorry, Hanson Street now.
Is it Hanson Street with?
Is it within a 10-minute walk of the hospital? Or?
10 minutes, okay. And is the price likely to be a barrier? Because at the moment, if people can find a park on the street, and it's a legal one, it's of course free. Do you think
But
prices?
you're asking us to move our cars, and we're on 2-hour intervals. So regardless of a 3-hour time limit, it's unthinkable to use a break when you need to rest to try and scramble back to your job in 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful. Thank you. Right, we'll move now to Ben. Ben is
not quite joined.
Okay, we have Kyan. Welcome, Kyan. There's 5 minutes, which can include questions if you wish.
Cool, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Awesome.
So I just have one very specific thing that I wanted to bring to your attention. I'm not aware of all of the other things you've heard today. My simple thing is I am a cyclist who bikes to town to work from Kilbirnie. And I bike, you guys have done a very good job making a lovely bike lane up from Kilbirnie to the top of Constable Street. And there's a lovely bike lane down Ridderford Street into town. But that means that, so I got excited and have made it part of my life. But that funnels me onto Constable Street, where it's basically a death trap of narrow lanes. And I was actually hit by a car clipped on coming down Constable Street during peak traffic. Cars get very impatient because there's parked cars. And so the buses and bikes are all forced into the lane with all of the peak hour traffic. Especially if you're going up the hill. I'm on a cycle and I can only go like 5 or 10K an hour. And then you have all of the peak hour traffic upset at you because they have to wait behind you. And people get very upset and will honk at you and will swerve around me into oncoming traffic, like causing problems. It's really awful going up the hill. When going down the hill, this particular instance in January, I've had close calls before. I've learned, because I've been car doored before, people opening their car door in front of you, to have a wide berth and be kind of in the middle of the lane. And so one of these people swerved around me, got like maybe 1 or 2 car lengths in front of me, and without indicating, swerved down Daniel Street. And it was like just road rage because I was in his way. And I ran into the side of him. It broke my bike. It took me about a month to afford the repairs to fix it. I'm a librarian down at Hātepe Street, and so I had to take a week off work because my leg was damaged from where he hit me, and kind of derailed my life for a month. And so for me, the thing I'm kind of raising is that this area of parking is really, really dangerous. It like causes lots of accidents. I've heard of other cyclists having issues. And so since you're considering the parking in the area, the thing that I thought might be a good idea would be to make the parking on Constable Street a thoroughfare, or during peak hours, I can't remember what it's called, sorry. But where the parking lane where it is there becomes a bus lane, and where bikes could go during 8 to 9 or whatever would be the best hours. That's my request, and then you basically have made a lovely, beautiful thoroughfare for cyclists from the suburb to the city. My only other request would be, can you make some sort of, if Constable Street is never going to be safe to bike on, can you make an official bike lane down the side streets or something? When I lived in Auckland, there were some of those. I would rather take a slightly longer route and not die. So that's my request and throwing into the ring.
Thank you, Kyan. Well, for a long, long time, I've been asking for a signposted directions, which we did put some sharrows and things down Coromandel Street, then down Wilson, Daniel, then down Mean. But yeah, I think we could do a bit more to do a back route. I have another question for you from Councillor Young, for Councillor Chung.
Thank you very much for this. Constable Street is actually, I actually find it even a very fast and narrow street because, of course, the buses go up and down there. So do you think that it'll be safe to actually have cycles going down there? Or should we, as you say, look at Wilson Street, Coromandel Street?
I mean, most of the other busy streets that I'm on have been redesigned, and I feel pretty safe, like on Ridderford Street and Adelaide Road. So I do know that it's a pretty rough spatial block. Like I empathize with, there's a lot of stuff happening in a very small amount of space. Personally, it is just that the parked cars are forcing me into the lane with all the cars. That is the dangerous thing. I would say that the realistic thing of cyclists is that if you do, the alternative route is not the ideal option. I wouldn't know it's there realistically unless I'm really searching it out. I'd say the majority of cyclists who just get on their bike and go somewhere are not going to know that there's a safe path to go on. And because the infrastructure is channeling me to there, I kind of assume that it's been designed to not funnel me into a really dangerous thing. So if it could be designed in an intuitive way, I think that could work. It wouldn't be as ideal as making a thoroughfare in peak traffic, but I think that cars and buses would all be safer if the parking there was made a clear way. It wouldn't just be the cyclists who would benefit.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kyan, and personally I'm really grateful for your submission because it's going to provide me with some ammunition to make some moves, a bit more ammunition than I've had in the past, so thank you.
Come talk to me if you want to hear more.
Oh, it's all right, I'm aware of it, I use the same route myself. Right, well, thank you again. Last but not least, Ben, do we have Ben? Hello, Ben, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can indeed.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for the opportunity to make a submission to you.
Yes.
Okay, so look, I'm just, I appreciate, I guess I would open up my submission by saying I really appreciate that the council implementing these plans to make the city make parking and mobility for transport better, get the city moving again. However, I've got some concerns, obviously, around the whole idea of the parking permit situation in regard to Newtown. And just the first thing is obviously cost. Everyone will be aware, I mean, it's of a worn out thing now, the cost of living crisis, but it is another cost that families are going to need to, bear. And I'm not sure how much that will be, but yeah, I think it's something to be mindful of. I know we've got 3 teenage children, and going to the supermarket is sometimes an ordeal. And to think that, at the moment we can park our car on the street, but to think then that maybe actually now we'll need to find another $200 and something a year on top of a very big rates bill. It makes it hard. It makes it really hard. And I guess going into that, the other thing is that there's the accessibility to the parking permits. So they're limited, and I appreciate why you have to have certain criteria so that the people who need them most, people who have mobility issues, do get them. But I'd imagine there'll be people who apply for them who just will miss out because there just aren't enough. And I guess, it just makes living in the city when you go park your car blocks and blocks away from where your house is a more difficult place, especially for families. I mean, it's not so difficult if you, a couple with no children, or retired, or you live on your own. Young professionals, but we do as a family bike. My wife bikes every day to work on an electric bicycle. I try to bike as much as I can to my place of work, but that said, it's not practical for us to just ditch our car and live without one. We do still need our vehicle, so it makes living in Wellington. I envisage that, if we can't get a parking permit, which will cost us money anyway, it's going to make living in the city for families that much more difficult. And I think in the long term that could change the whole composition and feel of our city, if families just find it just too difficult to live in suburbs like Berhampore and Newtown, they'll just go, it's too hard, it costs too much, it's, you know, can't park a car anywhere, you know, and I think it would be a shame, because I think Wellington needs every demographic well represented, you know, single people, young single people, retired people, you know, couples without children and families. So yeah, in terms of like the bus lanes and the cycle lanes, on principle, I'm definitely, you know, I as someone who does cycle to work when I can, and being married to someone who cycles every day to and from work, I think it is a good idea. But that said, and I'm sure this has been, I'm assuming this has been a common theme in your submissions. I'm really deeply concerned at the state of our water, and I think that should take precedence over any other kind of capital works at the moment. Water is one of life's essentials, and I find it really distressing to find that there were these little have blocked off one of the streets to make it a pedestrian street. And I know, well, it cost a bit of money, and then I'll walk a bit further and there's 2 or 3 leaks with water gushing just into the gutter. And I think until we sort out our water infrastructure, all these other projects need to take, or the water needs to take priority over those. Getting that fixed first, in my mind, as a ratepayer and a Wellingtonian, is absolutely the right thing to do. And it's not to say that cycleways are not important. They are, and I know that as a person who does cycle when they can to work, to and from work, and but in the hierarchy of things, I really want to give a message to the council as a citizen. The water is a big concern. I'm not alone in that. That's
Ben, we are running out of time. If you could just make maybe the final comments, or was that
okay?
it?
That's it. So I hope, yeah, you've heard that, especially that last point. But yeah, cost, making the city less more difficult to live in, and their priority with the water.
Okay, thank you. That's very clear. Do we have any questions for Ben? We are a little bit out of time, but is there a quick one? No, I think you've been super clear. We got those 2 main messages loud and clear from you, which was good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so that actually does bring us to the end of our submitters, and we just have 1 or 2 things to do now. So I will move that the committee receives the information, and obviously we hear the oral submitters and thank them for their submissions. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Chung. Is there any need to speak to this motion? I don't feel the need to speak to it, but if you okay.
I've taken on board what these submitters have said today, but it seems to be reminiscent of what we heard last year. The very similar sort of comments that we seem to be making it very complicated, and I have to admit that I was actually getting a bit confused about why it is so complicated. And so I'll be speaking to officers or asking officers about why we're not using the old residents parking only signs, because that seems to be one of the factors that's actually affecting the people who actually live there, because if they're sharing those spaces with other casual parkers, and I think particularly around the zoo, around Roy Street, around those areas here, and I've been up there myself when I've seen cars sort of just come up, not from people who live there, but people who are going to either the park or the zoo. So I think it is a real issue. So I need to understand exactly why it is so complex. And it may be because of the new technology that we're using with number plate recognition, but understanding and listening to these people, understanding how difficult it can actually be when we're just relying on reading one number plate and they can't sort of have car shares or other things. I think we need to consider these things because these people are actually out there trying to do their very best to actually do the right thing, and it seems like we're just not making it easy for them. So I'd like to actually have a much closer look at that and maybe go into some detailed conversations with council officers to understand the reasons that we are doing these things. Thank you.
Councillor Chung, Councillor Calvert.
Just like the similar paper near the end of last year, we've got the same issue coming up. The paper has to be before us by next Thursday, which is also just before Easter. We then have to be able to digest the information, check and check our understanding of the information with officers before the debate happens on Thursday. There's not enough time, and I would even suggest hearing the submissions and hearing the concerns of elected members about what we've heard today, whether that's sufficient for council officers to finalise their paper, which, as we know, will need to be by the end of this week. So I'm really concerned about the process, about and how we are hearing submitters and actually listening to them. Otherwise, we're just going ahead again with what I feel is a fait accompli. And in terms of we're not solving the really big issues here. We're taking a piecemeal approach and we're getting a piecemeal solution, which is going to cause even more problems.
Thank you for that. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. First, I would like to acknowledge that we have a real issue in Newtown and we need to address it. And I think this parking management is trying to address that issue. And my constituents asked me a few questions to have clarity, and in which case I didn't get any information from my side. I tried to ask that question to officers, and I think now it's nearly 2 months and I haven't got any answer. I think that is not something that I really appreciate. I want to bring it to the chair now, and that needs to be addressed, and I don't want that to be a kind of norm in this area. It's very important for me. I would like to apologize to my constituent for not responding to them on time, and now they do understand why, and I want to make that very clear. Thank you.
Any further debate? No, I will have a little bit of a right of reply. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you to the staff. It's been a very long process, and obviously this is the first time we've attempted something so comprehensive as a suburb-wide process. I'd like to say thank you to all the submitters. Over the course of the whole process that we've had, we must have heard from dozens. I wouldn't offhand know, but I'd say probably 50 or 60 submitters over the course of 2 or more meetings. I do agree that I think there's quite a need to fine-tune this. Some of the things that we've picked up are, issues around who has the authority to apply, how fair it's going to be, how difficult it's going to be with the visitors' permits, and with the time limits of having to ring somebody or contact somebody to notify who it is that you're giving the permit to, the enforcement issues, the actual fact that there's nothing you put in the car window, so it's actually going to be fairly possibly difficult to enforce. I think there actually are some fish hooks in this scheme, I have to be honest. I do wonder if it needs a bit more time, especially if we were going to implement. We've also heard various views about whether we implement the whole of Newtown in one go or do it in a two-piece approach. So I think there's some things I personally would like some answers for. We will have a chance to get some more information from staff between now and when we see the final paper. I'm sorry you haven't had the answers, Councillor Abdurrahman. I can pick that up and we can see if we can get you something urgently. I know I have been CC'd. Didn't have the information for you myself, but I am aware of the fact that you've been asking for some information. Yes, it's definitely going to be a tricky issue, I think, when the paper comes to us, but we will get one step at a time and see where we get to. That's it from me. I'm going to put it to the vote, remembering that what we are voting on right now is to receive the information, to hear the oral submitters and thank them for their submissions. And we'll put that to the vote. Is there any other debate? No, it's a bit late now anyway. Sorry, people online. I presume you would have let me know. All right. Okay, that's everybody. And that has passed unanimously. All righty. So we will read the closing karakia, and again, just thank everybody for their attention and the staff for their work that they're doing. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takatu. Kua rā I rongo, whakaaria, ake ki ronga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. All right, thank you everyone.